Good morning, everybody. Uh, Very warm welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us on this exciting roundtable, and it is a roundtable, although it might look square to you. We expect you to participate and share your ideas, share your wisdom, share things you might be doing as well in the area of philanthropy for climate. And as you can understand, climate touches every aspect of our lives, and climate touches all of the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. And we are honored to have a wonderful group of participants who will share with you what they've been doing and what their thoughts are on philanthropy. And this event is organized by the United Nations Framework for Climate Change Convention, which is commonly known as the United Nations Climate Change, the co-host for this event. And I'm thrilled to be working with them. They're based in Bonn, and I'm delighted Gaurav Manga, Head of Partnerships and Resource Mobilization, with us. And he'll give you a little tour de table of what they do, and then we start the discussion.
Great. Thank you, Amir. It's great to be in Riyadh, my first time, and I'm really enjoying the MENA Climate Week, not only as an organizer, but also as a participant. I think it's very exciting that we're having this event, especially with the special. We have Princess Noof joining us as well. Thank you so much. Well, I think it's very exciting that we are having this MENA Climate Week, and especially with this event discussing the role of philanthropies, because as we lead up to COP28, it's becoming more and more essential that we have all stakeholders on the table. And philanthropies more and more are not only just filling the gap, but also catalyzing climate action. I just want to give you a little bit of a quick recap of what the UNFCCC is, or as Amir put it, as we are known more and more externally, the UN climate change. We essentially have three roles at the moment. One is that we are the custodians of the three treaties, which is the three conventions, so which is the UNFCCC, the convention itself. We have the Kyoto Protocol and also the Paris Agreement. We are also the conveners of, I would say, probably the largest UN conference, which is COPs every year, the Conference of Parties. So we organize the sessions. There are two of them every year, and the COP being the big one, and this year will be in Dubai. And third, we are also playing a very catalytic role when it comes to working with all stakeholders, especially with philanthropies. So delighted to be here in this event. And this event is part of a long and running series that we plan to have. We had a soft launch last year of a new platform that the UNFCCC launched. It's called the Philanthropic Leadership Platform. And the goal of this platform is really to connect global philanthropies with regional philanthropies and giving them a platform in the UN itself, through the UNFCCC, at COPs, at regional climate weeks, at important forums, to see what are the best practices, what are the challenges, what are the opportunities, what works, what is not working, and to really have an open dialogue. Because I think philanthropies at this point, I think they're giving a lot, I would say about more than 200 billion a year, but actually to climate is less than 2%. So the opportunity is immense. They can really shape the world. I just wanted to play a little bit of a video of what we did last year at COP in Sharm that we did at the Resource Mobilization and Partnerships team, and we plan to do again this year, including another flagship event for the PLP, the Philanthropic Leadership Platform. I think we can just play a quick video just to give you a sense what we did last year and what we plan to do this year. Thank you. Is operational silence, exactly. Just maybe while we queue up the video again, I can just say that the idea of the Philanthropic Leadership Platform came essentially because COPs are a party-driven process. So what we do is increasing engagement from non-state actors, non-parties, such as the private sector, such as NGOs. And what we see is that we need to find a platform for philanthropies to come in as well and really talk about all the challenges and opportunities they're doing. So that's actually why this platform came about. I think we can now play the video. Yeah, okay, let's skip. We'll maybe play that another time. But just wanted to add in terms of how the UNFCCC is working with philanthropies. I think what we see with philanthropies is that they really have a role to amplify the messages, what we do. So we do a lot of work in adaptation, mitigation, climate finance. We are not an implementation agency, but we are conveners, as mentioned, and catalyzers. And what we see there is that philanthropies can come in. They can really support us financially, but also with a lot of their in-kind support, which is expertise, technologies, because they are really on the ground helping throughout the world in different regions. And what we see even more is that they can also help with advocacy when it comes to working with parties, with countries who really, shape the agenda. So their role is becoming more and more powerful.
Thank you, Gaurav, for putting in the perspective. This region is very well known for philanthropy, and often philanthropy is done quietly, and sometimes it's announced. But we found actually at the international community level that when you share what you're doing, you might inspire a few others, and people might want to replicate, partner, and so on. So we are coming from the direction of saying, how can we benefit from what is going on in the region? How can we learn lessons and actually grow it? And also engage others in the process. So the conversation today is really about what the panelists are doing, what the panelists have ideas in terms of what we should be doing, where UN climate change can actually partner with people, do things together that can really accelerate progress on not just climate, but the SDGs in general, because climate impacts, as I said at the beginning, all of the Sustainable Development Goals. Mrs. Nope, we are honored to have you here. Actually, thank you so much. I know you've got a very busy schedule, so we are grateful that you're here with us. And if you will permit me, I'll start with you in the conversation. We'd like to know what your view is in terms of global philanthropy, how the global philanthropic community should be acting in terms of addressing climate issues. I think most of us know that climate has not received enough attention, not just in the philanthropic community, but outside as well. We tend to be reactive rather than proactive. We don't necessarily think of prevention so much. We react when there's a disaster and we try and address that. And of course, we want to know in terms of what the MENA region is doing, actually. So we're honored you're here and welcome you.
Thank you so much for having me, and please excuse my ill-preparedness. So I hope I can be of some benefit. As we discussed a few days ago, and we've been hearing a lot over the last few days, I think one of the big issues is not having a human face on climate change, and not knowing that every philanthropy, every international organization is already working on climate change. Maybe we're not knowingly working on adaptation, but every fund we give, every program we have is actually adaptation. And I think if we can tie the issues together and we tie climate change to SDGs and to the human aspect, environmental aspect, so we unpack all the issues and redesign or represent what we're doing, we will see that we are doing quite a bit. And in the MENA region, or let me say in the GCC region, most of the giving is local. And we work again a lot on health issues, on different poverty issues, let me say, whether regarding agriculture, it's maybe less so in the GCC, just because of the nature of the world. our environment, but we are working on these issues, health issues, but we don't know it. So there is a marked lack of awareness in the region and within philanthropy already as to what we're doing and why. And if we do not address them, we will still be just using plasters and not addressing the systemic causes. So this is one thing. The other thing is that a lot of the mitigation research is happening maybe where it is easier to come by funding. So funding is always an issue, and more adaptive approaches need to be also prioritized within if they are going to fund. So it's not knowing we're just going to fund for mitigation. Adaptation is needed. We know if all the electricity, all the switches are switched off today, we still have years and years of damage done. So we need to be very ambitious, but we need the two-pronged approach. Maybe for the GCC countries, they are able through funding to fund for more more future solutions through mitigation, through the big research institutes. And again, another thing is we need to really look at all the players in the field, and whether universities, research institutes, governments, bring them together and design, think the issues, then like I said, with the correct inputs. That is one thing that needs to be done. So awareness. If we're not aware of the problem, we will never work to resolve it. And if we are not aware of how dire the situation is, and yesterday also it was said that 1.5 in the West is really 2.2 in the MENA region. And again, we need to understand the MENA region is quite different. The issues that are in North Africa are not what is in the GCC, what also is not in Egypt, what is not in Lebanon, Syria, Palestine, Iraq. There are shocks there that amplify the problem. So these are all issues we need to take into account. And one thing also that in just a panel a few minutes ago with the IFPRI that was said is that in areas of shock, funding for research stops. And it is diverted to more aid work, which is essential. But if we do not have the research and the knowledge of how we can predict and deal with future shocks, we're not going to achieve much. So we need awareness and long-term thinking and coming together and designing properly.
Thank you. That's very enlightening, actually. I have a question for you. What is the one thing you would recommend for philanthropies here in the region to do in terms of focusing on climate or climate-related, environmental-related programs?
I think it will. It's not going to be quick. It will need a lot of capacity building. So most of us are social organizations. If you want to switch to climate, that's a whole different sets of skills that you need. Different scientists. You need. So again, it is a long-term approach that we need to take. It's not a 5-year term to build up the capacity. We do not have that. So capacity building for the region.
Thank you. And I tell you, it's so refreshing coming back here to Riyadh, and I've been here in the past, and the progress being made, especially the passion amongst young people in the region, actually, which is the best thing that's happening. And it's an untold story. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to start with Naila now, actually. Naila, you've been in this sphere of operations about philanthropy foundations for a number of years. You've been really the pioneer through the Arab Foundations Forum. What is your vision in terms of focusing on philanthropies that can actually help the marginalized community? And what are the specific areas where some of your members are focusing on? That it'll be good for the audience to know and maybe get inspired by what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amir. So yeah, I run the Arab Foundations Forum, which is a network, a membership-based network of donors and foundations and other philanthropy actors that work across the Arab region. And we really only started our focus on climate as a strategic priority in the last couple of years. And part of that was we came into the climate conversation a bit tangentially. It wasn't something that we did as a strategic objective from our side. It wasn't a priority that we had identified. But we were brought in at a time when one of the groups that we were affiliated with, which is the F20 group, it stands for Foundations 20. It's one of the groups that reports into the G20. And so at the time, this is 2017, the F20 was taking a delegation to Buenos Aires in Argentina for the G20 summit, and they were looking for a representative of Arab philanthropy to talk about Arab philanthropy's commitments towards climate. And they came to us as a network of Arab foundations and other philanthropy actors to ask us our membership was focusing on climate. And we had no one in our membership that was focusing on climate. And it's a very vast network. I mean, our membership is about 42, 45 members, give or take, in any given year, but our network is in the thousands. And we couldn't identify a single foundation that had, placed the climate agenda as one of their key priorities. So I went as a representative of this network in a learning capacity, right, to sort of listen and learn, and really got very overwhelmed with the kind of information and the education that it takes to understand what is the role of philanthropy actors in addressing climate. So since 2017, we've kind of systematically over time, partnered up with some of our members, the King Khalid Foundation being one of those members, and actually one of the members that has been the most active in helping us recognize what the power of a network like the Arab Foundations Forum, what that power can yield in terms of the contribution to climate. So we've identified several different places where this can happen. First is, networks are a unifying force, right? And they are a convening force. So again, like I mentioned, even if our membership is in, 40, 45 members, we do have a reach that extends across the entire 22 country region in the thousands. So that's one thing. The second is that there's a power of dissemination when it comes from one place. So while we were looking at how do we talk to our members and our network about the climate situation, when we are not scientists, we are not data scientists, we're not environmentalists, none of us actually work in the climate space. But how do we make the kind of education and capacity development available to our networks? What a network is able to do is bring a lot of people together in one place and share information that can be useful for people in their climate journey. So that's one thing that we've done. And in fact, with the King Khalid Foundation, we've actually taken some of the courses that are made available on a grand scale, almost accessible to anyone. But often a lot of that information is very global north focused. So we've partnered up with King Khalid Foundation and others to customize some of that information and tailor it to a culturally contextual framework. So that's one thing. The other thing is the advocacy role that a network can play. So often when we're dealing with issues in our region that might be a little bit controversial for one organization to stand up and kind of play an advocacy role, we have a bit more of a sector agnostic kind of position that we can take. So we can be spokespeople on particular advocacy issues on behalf of the network, which is by extension on behalf of the sector. The other place is around data and where we feel the contribution of data that is being collected and analyzed and aggregated from the region, how we can raise the visibility of that data. And I know Reem is going to talk a bit more about that, so I'll let her kind of take the data mantle forward. But just to say that one of our strategic objectives as the Arab Foundations Forum is to continuously champion the collection, aggregation, analysis, dissemination of data on the Arab region, from the Arab region, by Arabs, in Arabic and in English, so that it can be visible across the world. The other thing, just to pick up on Princess Noof's point around building capacity. So we, again, just to reiterate that we feel a network has a very strong kind of positioning to be able to build capacity. We have the ability to raise the visibility and the exposure of our sector around the world. So coming to, roundtables like this, making time to, to appear, to speak on behalf of the network, to make the activities and the contributions of our network visible globally. That's another place where we feel we have, a role to play. And then ultimately, really just to continuously reiterate that philanthropic capital has the unique advantage of being quite flexible. Right? It is adaptable. It's easily used to react to ever-changing environments beyond just a humanitarian kind of intervention. Thank you.
Thank you, Naila. And And I will come back to you in terms of how you collaborate with other networks around the world as well. I know you're part of different initiatives as well. So yesterday we attended a panel on philanthropy in this room, and it was very inspiring. But one of the most interesting conversations, we were following the way the conversation was conducted by this very smart young lady who moderated the thing. Thank you for doing that, Ashley. So I'm inspired by her approach of saying, let's engage the audience. Let's ask the audience, because you're also part of this discussion. So I'll ask you an easy question. How do you see, and this is whoever is working on this, how do you see your work in philanthropy supporting the climate change agenda? Who would like to take up this easy question? Please. Please give your name. Great. Thank you. A very good point, which President Nawaf also mentioned, that capacity building is key for us. Actually. And it applies across the world, basically. If you don't have the ability to deal with issues, don't have the capacity, you're doing patchwork at the end of the day. Would anybody else like to? Please. Thank you. Thank you. So really the term is agility of response of the philanthropy. Please. Thank you.
I'm Salma. I work for the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. It's a multilateral development bank.
Right.
And I think that there's an important role that philanthropy can play in helping to mobilize private sector investment that you need to actually catalyze climate action on a proper scale. And we're seeing that there are a lot of just energy transition platforms now that are coming out that we can have philanthropy play an important role in, filling in the gaps where governments can't come in. We haven't really seen a lot of successful cases of this yet, but I think that given the flexibility, given the adaptability, given the agility that philanthropy can play, I think that we can probably have a more active role for philanthropy to play around just energy transition platforms in the region. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And does EBRD also make grants or is it mainly loans or it's a combination?
A combination of both. Definitely lots of concessional financing,
Right.
But there's definitely some grant making. So it's always like a partnership between philanthropy and NCBs, or it should be at least.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, ma'am. Microphone there, please. And then thank you.
Thank you for your time. My name is Noor Yunus, and I also come from IE. And I think relating it to the long-term vision and capacity building, then he was mentioning. I think it is also important not only to allocate the resources and the capital to the specific problem, but also to consider the interconnectedness that many different issues might have. Because I feel that, especially from the academic side, we focus so much on carbon emissions sometimes that we fail to acknowledge the fact that perhaps humanitarian issues might affect as well other different, for example, or other aspects that affect then to climate change, such as biodiversity loss, for example. So I think that's something that I would like to hear more in this sort of conversations. How can we consider the interconnectedness of all the systems so that we can tackle properly on the long term climate change and the issues that are affecting us?
Thank you. A very good point, actually. You deal with the short term, but you also have an eye on the long term. Thank you. Ma'am, I have a microphone here, please. Thank you.
Good morning. We are a group here representing women and gender constitution. My note, it is not question, my note about the role of philanthropies, you know. I think it is the most important issue in the disasters, in the risk situation, in the conflict. But I think from our experience, last experience during the immigration, you know, and the Syrian and Iraqi immigration, you know, we noticed that there was a big a donation, you know, because the fund was very generous in that time. But in the same time, as a philanthropy institutions, you know, it should be linked with the development, you know, and the need assessment and the capacity building that make these people who are needed for fund, for money, for aid assistant, for medical assistant, you know, so as to improve their situation and to help you to overcome this disaster and this conflict. So that will be, you know, existed when we build the capacity of the NGOs, because they will be a good arm for you and for all the donors. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. I just want to make a point that when we were doing peacekeeping operations at the United Nations, we started that, we realized that the people who were impacted on the ground, the local civilians, they needed that two-step process: aid for immediate assistance, but also long-term development, rebuilding the infrastructure and the country and so on. So thank you for pointing that out. Thank you. Okay, one last one, sir, please.
It won't be long. My name is Dania Beit. I'm based in Lebanon. I'm with the ACT Alliance. I just wanted to stress on the importance of networking with faith-based organizations. They have plenty of expertise. Some of them are not really implementing agencies, but working a lot on advocacy, sometimes training, following with the COP, etc. So I think working together would help a lot. There is a lot of synergy that we can make in all of this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'm sorry, I didn't get the name of your organization.
It's ACT Alliance.
Okay, thank you. By the term, it's about building partnerships and working together. So thank you. That's key for us, actually. This is what UNFCCC is also doing. Gara's role is about resource mobilization and partnerships. You work together, you have a 10x opportunity. So I want to go back to our esteemed panelists and again pose to them some other questions and seek their ideas. So we have Reem Abdul Hamid, who is the regional director for the WHO Foundation. That foundation was set up a couple of years ago to support the mission of WHO, and it was in the making for a while, but it actually gained renewed importance after COVID. And I'm really pleased that the UN has not been very good in terms of what I would say engaging with non-state actors. And my friend Nagi, he knows he's been mobilizing the private sector when he was with the Global Compact, it did advocacy and a lot of things. So WHO Foundation is one of a few handful. The first earliest one was UNICEF, Fund for USA. Then there's UNHCR and WHO Foundation. I'm really delighted that you're here. Could you share with the audience as to where you see these types of foundations helping the mission of the United Nations system? And similarly, what UNFCCC does and what others do. How can these foundations play that proactive role?
Thank you. Thank you, first of all, for having me, and thank you for joining us. I think many of you touched upon a lot of issues that are extremely relevant to the work that we do at the WHO Foundation. I want to start by saying, first of all, that yes, there is a situation where people are working in silos, right? And when I say silos, it's not just international versus local, for example. It's also industry. And then in the case of climate change, I think that for many, many years, it was sort of very focused on climate change without looking at it from a more multi-sectoral perspective. Climate change is affecting health. It's affecting others. I mean, it's affecting us in every possible way. And I think that to find a solution, we need to sort of look at that from that lens. We need to bring on board the different people and the different actors from these different industries to begin with. But not only that, we also need to work. We cannot just come, for example, I work for WHO Foundation, so it's an international entity, right? And I can't come to the region with a solution or with an initiative without having the relevant context from the region, right? So the collaboration, and most of the time what happens that we come with these ideas, but they're already pre-cooked almost, and the need is actually to work with the local entities and the local experts on the ground to be able to start off on the right foot to begin with. So it has to have relevance, you get buy-in, and suddenly things move much faster and more efficiently, if I can say that. I think the other thing as well is that there's a lot of research being produced, and you mentioned data. There's a lot of research being produced in the region. Again, it's probably not shared as widely as it needs to be, unfortunately, but it has to be the basis of these initiatives as well, because again, going back to the idea of coming with, global North ideas, if I can say that, and trying to implement them, it doesn't work. We've tried it, we know for years, and it really doesn't work. So the only way to do it is through these collaborations. I think also some of the challenges we face as an international organization. I mean, I come from UNDP, and before that and after that UNHCR. So I do know the system quite well, and I do know the challenges. I do believe there's a lot of skepticism sometimes from philanthropists, right? And they look at us thinking, okay, you're these huge organizations, you're taking where's my money going and how's it going? And of course, the elephant in the room is always, and core funding. Nobody wants to, fund core funding, but then how does the work get done, right? I mean, we're there to monitor, evaluate, implement, report, and whatnot. So I think these are all different things that we address all the time. When it comes to actually being on the ground and working, I think in the MENA region here, there's also, there's legal constraints or bylaws that are very strong, are very restrictive in terms of how to work with philanthropists, not only with international organizations, but local organizations. And I think it's understandable in most cases because, there needs to be a way to track all the giving that's coming out of the region, but perhaps its application sometimes overcomplicates matters. And I think there's a lot of room there for discussion around, how can we be more effective? Because at the end of the day, we're all seeking the same thing, right? We're looking for impact and long-term impact. When it comes to climate change, I just want to say that in the region here, I think when there's an emergency like the drought or the famine, that's in the news, or the earthquake or flooding or whatever, that's in the news, and there's an immediate reaction, right? And people tend to, put their hands in their pockets and say, yes, we want to support. When we look at climate change on the long term, which is what people were saying, it's a more difficult story. And I think Princess Nov said it's really important to humanize it, right? And it is difficult, but one is humanizing climate change. So really putting people at the center, but it's also the way, it's also how we reach philanthropists as well. We need to humanize that well, because people, that we have traditional giving here, but we also have more institutionalized giving. This is becoming more and more prominent, and people are shifting from traditional giving to institutionalized giving. But it's more at face value at the moment, because at the end of the day, the person who signs the check is a philanthropist. But you have to go through all these layers. And for us, this is a challenge as well, because by the time we reach that philanthropist, it's been dehumanized as well. So I think it's humanizing philanthropy and humanizing the cause. That's important. Thank you.
Thank you, Reem, for really giving us the inside perspective of the challenges you face as well. In terms, I can relate to what you're saying about restriction and bylaws. At the same time, we found that countries are reticent about allowing external forces to tell them what they should do, for example. So it's not always easy. It's a balancing act, actually. So I appreciate that very much, your perspective. And now I'd like to invite my good friend, Mr. Hassan Nasser, who is the Chef de Cabinet and Director for Partnerships at the Digital Cooperation Organization, an organization which was set up 2 years ago, headquartered in Riyadh, focused on digital cooperation amongst currently 13 countries. 50? Very good. It's already grown to 15 countries. And if you visualize it, if you think outside the box, digital technology can play a critical role in addressing some of the vagaries of climate we're faced with. So I'm going to invite Hassan to share his thoughts and as to how, Hassan, to put you in the corner. Tell us how you can address the climate challenges.
Thank you. Thank you, Amir. I don't feel in the corner. I just feel I need to justify a bit my presence, like in this novel of Asimov, because I'm not working on philanthropy and we are not focusing on climate. However, I think the purpose of this kind of forum is to bring together people who are not usually working together. So digital cooperation, of course, has a very strong focus on the economic impact. So let's say the key measure for DCO is to increase the contribution to the GDP from digital-based economy. However, we have two elements in the mission. We want this growth to be inclusive when it comes to social element, and we want this growth to be sustainable. So for today, I think what I see in this discussion and also the interaction with the audience, which can be really relevant, we have two elements. First, from a digital perspective, you can see digital as a solution to really help to develop more climate-friendly activities, economic activities. So we have a lot of elements, and we were discussing, for instance, when it comes to philanthropy, the allocation of resources. Digital solution can help to monitor results without having this extra cost on monitoring and evaluation. Digital solution can also help to monitor on-the-ground result when it comes to climate, but it also when it comes to disaster management and other elements which are very close to the questions philanthropists can ask when they have to decide where to provide funding. When it comes to digital, we also see another element, which is the, let's say, the dark side of the digital. We know today that, okay, digital economy is growing, it's fantastic, but every picture of a cat you're sending on Instagram is consuming energy. And it's a very big issue for us because the more data we are transferring, sometimes for no reason, the more impact also we may have in the future on the climate. So we need to be really aware of that. And that's where, again, partnership with government, but also philanthropy can play a very interesting role because we need to create new solutions. And we have new solutions. So innovation, we were thinking about, we're talking about being more agile. Philanthropy can help to have agile initiatives. In terms of technology and innovation, that's also a place where philanthropy can play a very interesting role because that can be a place to explore new digital solutions. The very strong focus on digital innovation, of course, is on very, let's say, short-term return on investment sometimes. But there are a lot of new innovation, a lot of startups coming with very bright ideas that should be supported, and probably that could be a place where philanthropy can find a place. So at the DCO, we bring together government, we bring together also the private sector, civil society, and we are really focusing on startup. We are creating an association, which is called the Stride Association, where we will bring together startups from the 15 member states. 15 member states are from Bangladesh to Morocco, including, of course, Saudi Arabia with the founder, but we have also one European country with Cyprus, we have country in Africa and Middle East. So bringing all these startups together will be a place where we really want them to innovate and to find solutions which are addressing issues and challenges related to the Sustainable Development Goals, including, of course, climate change. So that's where I see that I justify my existence today, and I'm really pleased to be here for this conversation. Thank you.
Yes, and in fact, it's right for you to be here, because when you think of it, information on climate cannot get written on a piece of paper and transported. You need digital solutions. You need data, and for instance, now you'd mentioned yesterday about the importance of data gathering, data systems. So you can be the conduit passing that data efficiently, effectively. And I'm glad you're thinking of adding philanthropies to your vision, actually. Thank you. I want to invite Gaurav to share with you in terms of where he sees philanthropies supporting the work of UNFCCC. Gaurav, you've worked on a number of partnerships, especially with the private sector and civil society. And incidentally, I was very pleased to learn that UNFCCC has the highest number of observers who participate in these conversations on climate, something like 7,000 plus. And UN needs to be a lot more democratic. UN actually wrote the book on bureaucracy, I can tell you. The lady pointed out about agility of response. We know 101 ways to say no, and you'll come back and thank us for it. So Gaurav, I appreciate that, and also where you think the future collaboration might look like.
Thank you, Amir. I have to say, before I get to your question, one thing I was reflecting as my distinguished panelists were speaking is actually what we really need when it comes to climate. We need coalitions, and actually this panel is almost it's almost a good recipe for success. We need strong leadership. We need networks. We need people on the ground who understand in the foundation's landscape what is going on, so they can react fast. We need digital, because digital is the future, and we need strong NGOs as well, who are putting, at the end of the day, partnerships and collaboration together. So I think these are the type of coalitions we need for climate, given the challenges we're facing. Coming to Amir's question, actually, maybe I can just give you a little bit perspective of the UNFCCC. As I mentioned right at the start, it's a UNFCCC, and what we convene with the climate process is a party-driven process. So we have been always very much funded by parties themselves. But as with every COP, and you can see this in the news with every year, we have more and more mandates because we have more and more challenges. And that has meant that the UNFCCC has been really struggling for resources over the last few years, because what the parties have given the UNFCCC is not enough. We need more. So we have started to work over the last few years a lot with the private sector to really engage and amplify. And only very recently, we believe philanthropies is the next step that we need to take. And we have already started, but it's just the start of a very long journey. Because what philanthropies can do is they can come in, they can provide flexible grants, flexible funding, soft earmarked, sometimes hard earmarked. But the point is, they can come in and move very agile compared to some of our other traditional donors, which are parties, which we have to work with ministries and so forth. So it can take a long time. We're talking about really literally years at times. So philanthropies can have really the speed to come in. And what we see coming with philanthropies is that a lot of our core work that we do that has been mandated has been put into something what we call supplementary activities. And these supplementary activities, some of them really cover key things we do. some of it in communications, some of it is engagement, some of it is in the global goals on adaptation, some of it is on transparency. So we have a lot of work that we're doing, and we need more support. And we have started to engage, and we believe that the philanthropies, not just the global philanthropies, but regionally, can also just not only bring funding, but also bring perspective. And that's what we see the future is that we don't only need funding from philanthropies, but we also need their expertise, because with leadership, with networks, we can really amplify the work we do. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about money. It's actually more than just funding. So the future going forward, we really see with the UNFCCC, but I would say the larger in the UN system is that we need to really sit together. We need to understand how we can find synergies. We have a lot of activities within the UNFCCC that we're doing, that we're mandated to, but also throughout the UN system. And philanthropies are also doing not the same, but they can really help us where we finish, they can help us begin and really extend our reach, extend our impact. So I think in being more impactful, and that's where we at the UNFCCC believe where collaborating with philanthropies in a closer level can be really helpful for us going forward.
Thank you, Gaurav. You mentioned about your engagement with philanthropies. So this platform which you talked about earlier, how can people in this room participate? What was the approach on this?
But what we see with the platform is we want to engage three types of I would say stakeholders in the one are the philanthropies themselves and leaders in philanthropies, such as Princess Noof, for example. I think we'll definitely be reaching out to her later on that. We want to engage philanthropists, but especially young philanthropists. Not necessarily everyone who maybe has a lot of funding to offer, but people who are interested in different levels of philanthropy, in advocacy. And third, where we want to engage with the Philanthropic Leadership Platform is to engage networks, because what we see is that we cannot do this alone. We can convene, and just such as this event, such as the MENA Climate Week, which we are co-organizing together with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which I believe hopefully gives you a glimpse of all the work we do throughout the year. It's together basically getting all these different types of stakeholders in the platform. We will be having a website. We already have a web page, but we're working on a much more for larger launch at COP28, where we would like to partner with many different philanthropies, but also have some sort of a charter where we can have more and more different stakeholders coming in, especially the young philanthropists and the youth as well. We're very keen on having them as well, providing their perspective, because one thing what happens, maybe I can say it from the UN perspective, but I think Amir, you have had a much longer history with the UN, is that we are a lot of times in silos, as we mentioned. We need to break from those silos, and I think getting different perspectives really helps the UN also be more impactful, more efficient. Sometimes it might seem from the outside we are very bureaucratic, things are not working. I can definitely tell you we are trying our best. It is difficult. We need your help. We need your support. Thank you.
Thank you. And I can vouch for the fact that Gaurav can make things happen. Thank you. Let me go back to colleagues here. What we'd like to do is to get your views. You heard a number of our panelists talk about capacity building, collaboration, networks. What we want to think of is some concrete ideas, how to make these things happen. And your views, if you're doing anything in practice, you share with us. I have a gentleman who, please introduce yourself, sir. He'll give you a mic. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the great session. My name is Muhannad Al-Sheikh. I'm CEO of Johnson Controls Arabia, based here in Saudi. I used to work for the World Bank Group about 20 years ago. And I know you're holding this conference here in Saudi, which I believe is a great way to engage people from the GCC. If I were to give an advice based on the experience I've had working for the Saudi government, working for International Development Organization, and now been with the private sector for the past 13 years or so, is you need to, with UN agencies, with international development organizations, you need to engage more people from the GCC to work with the United Nations agencies. There is a great level of underrepresentations that I've witnessed 20 years ago. I don't think this has changed. And if you want engagements from this region, you need, I'm talking about in particular from the GCC region. I believe the UN and UN agencies need to go out of their way to create programs where young females and males are able to engage, understand the challenges at a global level, and understand, I mean, when it comes to climate, it comes to environmental related issues. I mean, just looking at the composition of this room, the majorities are people from not from the GCC countries. And this has a great implications on the effectiveness of the work that you try to do at an international and regional level. Thank you.
Thank you, and very helpful advice. So I'm sorry, I missed the organization.
Johnson Controls. We're in the building efficiency business.
Quite right.
We are responsible 40% of the global emissions because of the technologies or the gas emission that comes out of buildings. So
right.
The topic is close to our heart.
Good.
Thank you.
And very important point about representation from the GCC area, actually. It's always been a challenge for the UN because where we are based, where the influences lie and so on, and how the roles are distributed. UNDP has the largest representation in the region and has focused on this area, as it does in other countries. Only recently, I would say in the last 10 years, there's been an interest from the region to provide expertise. The easiest way to do it, and you might find it interesting, it's no longer a political process as it is an skills-based, expertise-based. You apply online, and it's not rocket science. You use the same keywords as the job description to say, I meet the criteria. After that, maybe there could be a sort of encouragement from the permanent missions in New York to say, we have a candidate who's applied, and we hope you will at least consider the candidate. You want to make it in the top 10 list, short list, and then it's up to the individual. Thank you.
Hello. So this is Hajar Biltaji. I'm a researcher, urbanist, and lecturer assistant in architecture in engineering and environmental design in Egypt. And I came here with Women and Gender Constituency under UNFCCC. So I have two main questions. So first of all, about challenging the model of philanthropy, especially in MENA region. Well, I've been in civil society aside from academia since 2012 in Egypt. And the most challenging aspect of getting a fund of our work on the ground is the endless hoops that we have to jump through just like to get our ideas verified. So I've been thinking like, isn't there any other way that we can build the trust between youth and the philanthropists aside from endless hoops and structures and like endless applications that we spend millions of hours and like getting a lot of rejections and it's not the way out from my side to sustain our work. So I'm just thinking like, can we come into discussion that we can think of other structure to move forward? And my second question is especially about women in the MENA region, in the most affected areas. I would say this is like a question and also an observation from my side that we can like diversify the way in which we're building communication with women, especially in rural areas in the MENA region, and go above and beyond just building partnerships with the governments or the official organizations. Otherwise, we will keep reiterating the whole process all over again. So I would say, first of all, we can, like, this is a suggestion, but I'm not sure to what extent it's possible from your side. But from MENA region, we can map out the needs of women, especially women, in the MENA region in different areas aside from centralization. I've been like in I'm not gonna mention countries or whatever, but like we know how centralization affects women and affecting the opportunities that we got. So I would really, really hope that we map out women's need in the climate justice movements, aside from what governments or officials are telling us. Like we should go there, but I'm not sure how to what extent it's possible. Um, because in the recent few years, I've been in touch with so many women from offline communities, and it really breaks my heart how have been how they have been challenging in sustaining everyday's life. So I'm just wondering to what extent it's possible to map things out, like aside from like communicating with the officials or like UN agencies or official organizations. Like, can we do it like one-to-one, like from the bottom up, aside from top-down approach? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. I thank you for your comments and concerns. I want to put this question to Naila Faruqi. Naila, you have a network of foundations, and I guess what the young lady is saying, we need somebody to listen to us. We've got ideas, and we need help, and we don't want bureaucracy, and we can't handle the corporate restriction, but they're also national restriction. How would you suggest that we might consider looking at these things?
Yeah, thank you. حاسة بيكي قوي. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we try to look at as a network that works across the region. So we work in Egypt, we work, I mean, you know, we're really open to working in any one of the 22 countries, is a lot of these restrictions are really impeding any of the progress that philanthropy can make. I mean, Egypt alone has 55,000 registered NGOs, okay? 55,000 registered NGOs. And that's Egypt alone. So it's physically and ideologically impossible for one ministry to oversee 55,000 registered entities and to see to them in a way that is productive and encouraging and empowering, et cetera. So one of the things that we try to look at from our advocacy perspective, and you know, obviously depending on where we are in the region, we're very careful about what we mean when we say advocacy. So we're not trying to be activists in a sense, we're not trying to burn down the entire sector. But what we really want to be able to do is to advocate for the rights of the civil society sector to be able to function in an environment that is enabling and to take away that lack of trust that seems to have sprung up somehow, at least over the last 20 years, between private sector, public sector, and the third sector. So it's not an easy thing, and it's not something that I think can happen overnight, but I feel one of the roles that a network like ours, and I'm very happy to talk with you about this afterwards, because I'm based in Cairo, by the way, فممكن نتقابل على جنب. But to say that, you know, we really are trying to find the space for us for how we can advocate on behalf of people in our sector, and particularly when you're looking at the climate issue and you look at it from a gender lens. You know, I attended a panel just a few days ago, right before coming here, where we were talking about the gender kind of impact on the climate crisis. And by all accounts and all data and all science, and this crisis is not going to be saved without women. It just simply won't, right? So I think that, you know, there's a lot that we can do to talk about how networks like ours can help advocate. The only other thing I'm going to say is that I will never send another cat meme again. And every time I do, I'm going to remember what Hassan said about it being completely useless. Thanks.
Thank you. If I may add to something you mentioned about the process reiteration and offline communities, and I'm going to connect this to funding, we started some initiatives, and the way we did it, so just for context, it was a student investment fund, right? And we wanted to do it in a way that we could get funding so that part of the donations would go to scholarships directly, and the rest we would put it into our fund, right? This is fully student managed, and we did it ourselves. And since we started it, lots of this is in Spain, and many other universities started talking to us, like, how did you do it? How can we also build it up? And the process reiteration is very important, because what we did is simply just create, like, on our website, we created, like, literally step by step of everything we did, how we framed, like, our investment strategy, who helped us, who they can reach, and also our contacts, so that we can connect them to someone else. And whenever anyone just wants to start something like that, they have that first contact point, right? And then this is going to save them a lot of time, especially because we've tried to standardize every process. This in the context of a university, people rotate a lot, so maybe this is a problem that you're facing as well. We made sure to really standardize everything and work with people that were in the industry already, so that they could help us. So maybe this is something you could try. And something else, for the offline communities, we also did, like, events with people from other unis. And then we were just teaching each other. So maybe sometimes it's not just trying to rely on organizations, but try to do it ourselves, and maybe manage the problem just from our side. And from the funding side, instead of going and reach out maybe to very big organizations, what you could maybe try from our experience is start with smaller ones. Maybe you just get that first push, and then you can maybe start from there, right? It was just something that I wanted to mention in case it helps you, because it seems that what you're doing is really nice. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Much appreciated. I want to bring the conversation back to how philanthropies can help the climate agenda. I can see there's a need for another panel to discuss how NGOs can get more engaged and the challenges NGOs face. And I think we should have that. Gareth, that's another task for you on another day. So may I request you to give us that perspective? That's the lady here. Thank you.
Good afternoon. First of all, thank you so much for the opportunity of being in this roundtable. I come from a university, and after the conversation, I think that I would describe the philanthropy role in three main pillars to basically humanizing climate change, which was mentioned. And I think that that key term was really gave me a lot of interest. First, the first pillar, I would say, would be the role of innovation. I would say that nowadays I've been working with several organizations back in Spain and consultancy agencies that are basically giving funds to access to innovation projects in order to create sustainable projects, at least for now in the European Union is the ones I know. And it's not only facilitating funding, but it's also facilitating advisory services and also easier conditions in order for entrepreneurs to create this innovation projects, which at the end can scale into the UN network and other organizational networks. And also it's about creating a platform of experts that can help develop these type of projects, which can then, because it's complicated when you get a startup and a first innovation project that has not a solid base in order to pitch it to large organizations such as the UN to use it as a model. So I believe that this first role of innovation can be helpful in order to afterwards scale it through the help of philanthropists to these large organizations and make a huge impact. The counterpart that I see here is that a lot of these innovation projects are done in developed countries, and it's generating a higher gap in the developing countries that do not have the access to these type of innovation projects nor this type of funding. So I believe that this type of innovation needs to happen all over the world in order to assure that the gap does not continue to increase. Mostly because MENA region and Latin American region, where I come from, I believe that this is an issue that really needs to be tackled. Second pillar that I wanted to explain was basically how cooperation, it's important, but basically transparent cooperation, and not only because of how good it looks and how beautiful it sounds, but rather because creating a network, not it gives you insights that large organizations might not be able to see by their own, but they need local and regional hands-on in order to get information from the people. So I believe that the UN has been doing a great job into cooperating with private sector, public sector, civil society, and then NGOs in order to get this. And I think that in this point, philanthropists have the huge role on trying to help to adapt into cultures and adapt into regional issues that are so specific, and that even if they are so specific, they might be the key reason why some projects do not work and do not get to the final objective. So I think that also, apart from giving insights, it assured transparent. At the end, it creates trust, which is the main issue of why some of the problems are not getting. So I think that as Mrs. Faruqi mentioned, it's network, it's a unifying force. And finally, I would like to say that the third pillar, it's basically education. At least in University, we have the pleasure to do UNSSC courses from the UN Staff College. And I think that this is an opportunity to have our hands on a course that not only gives us theoretical insights on how climate change is changing, but rather on how can we as students start changing and start creating initiatives that will create an impact in the future. Also, I would like to say that it's part of educating our generation on issues that are not going to happen in 30 years from now, but that are happening right now, such as the displacement and the migration due to climate change. So I think that that technology and innovation, that education, and that the cooperation transparently are the main pillars that philanthropists can help to get.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, you've already spoken. Can I invite somebody else? Because we're running out of time, and I just want to ask somebody who's not spoken. Please. Can I take the question separately? Thank you.
Well, good afternoon.
And please operate on less is more.
Sorry?
Short.
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
My name is Juan Pablo Fernandez. I am representing the Foundation for Leadership and Miami-Dade College. And I think one of the issues that when it comes to philanthropies is that it's very easy to identify the problem, and it's very easy that people come up to you and tell you, hey, here's the problem, but they never come up to you and say, hey, here's an actual solution, help me fund it, or help me see what we can do to actually drive and get it. So, and maybe sometimes it's maybe because of the cultural, or maybe there's just a situation that is people are thinking that has another idea, or they have their own problems that make them not focus on climate change or things like that. So I wanted to ask you, how can young people come up to you and show you or try to develop methodologies of solution so it can be implemented in the region or also other parts of the world, so that knowledge can be expanded towards another boundaries?
Thank you. A very good question. So and I'm going to take you a little bit higher up at the UN level. There is a youth forum and there's a civil society forum. And I'm sorry to tell you, it's all in New York. What needs to happen is it should be regional, it should be national, and there should be ways, and that's why we have DCO here who can help us communicate better, share those ideas and so on. It's really clear that the philanthropy side of it is not really addressed. And part of the reason is that the UN has not gone out to philanthropies and say, you must contribute. it's the philanthropies who have a mission and they come to us and say, we want to support humanitarian aid or education or women's empowerment or health issues and poverty and so on, or urbanization. Today's conversation is about how do we benefit from what's happening in the MENA region and maybe find ways to extrapolate that somewhere else. And I'm going to then start by asking our panelists, and I know we've got 15 minutes, so I apologize for the short time, but we want to benefit from the expertise of our distinguished panelists. We would love to get your thoughts in terms of, you've heard amazingly enriching questions. Some of them, the answers are difficult to come by right now, but it's something which should be addressed. And where maybe the UN can play a role, where philanthropies can play a role, and where networks can play a role. Thank you.
So a lot has been said, and a lot of the pain here is heard and felt by everyone. To start off, I think one of the most legitimate organizations is the UN. UN has always been described as a big tanker that moves slowly, but it moves and it moves surely. So maybe we need adjustments or little tugboats to pull you one way or another faster. Philanthropy is also changing, for your question there, and it's changing because the voices of local NGOs are stronger and more empowered, and they're understanding that what we need to do is not what we want to do or what works, but actually what is needed. In terms of funding, again, philanthropy is quickly changing the way it funds. What the bureaucracy of funding is tiring for you and disappointing, and very frustrating also for people working within foundations. So there's from inside foundations and outside, there's a push to change. In terms of financing, climate cannot be separated from development and developmental rights. And what we're seeing now is how this is more and more the new solutions to funding is through new or different elements or modes of debt financing. The best of which is concessional debt financing. I have a problem with just businesses coming in because again, businesses are even more difficult than foundations because they will fund a lot, but they're not really brave. We've always said business is more innovative. Businesses are the ones that create, but it has really all come out. If you go back to government research, nonprofit research, and educational institutions. So funding through debt financing is not going to work. No matter how much money you bring in from foundations, it's not going to work. It's bigger than that. The bottlenecks aren't the funding from foundations. It is the whole economic system that we need to address. I think foundations do a great job, but also I think they do a better job trying to put sometimes plasters on the problems, and they're very reluctant to address the bigger issues or the systemic issues. And I hope to see more philanthropies working, advocating within, and yes, philanthropy. And again, we have to depoliticize climate. Otherwise, again, we'll be doing about faces and we'll be putting in something there, something that sounds great, but then we're going to change and we lose trust. It's like, oh, well, you told me to do this and we had a plan, but now you're saying, no, I don't need to do that because we're going to solve it without this plan. So it needs to be depoliticized. It needs to be a worldwide endeavor. And again, the financing needs to be looked at through a different lens, looking at, again, the international financial architecture. And we cannot we cannot, how do I say, the businessification of foundations and donations, that can't happen. That will not get us anywhere. It will create different types of poverty.
Thank you. Do you think there is a opportunity for us to create a platform here where a group of you provide the tugboat for the UN?
I think it won't be just a local Saudi base. It will have to be encompass more. Again, we still need the capacity, but we still need to understand and know and believe that we are suffering from climate change.
Right. Yeah. A very, very good point. And President Nauf mentioned, the most important thing is not to try and be too much of an activist. The moment you try and do that, people shy away. They'll say, okay, there's an agenda, I have to be sensitive about it. The most successful activism has been about gender parity. And it's the UN adopted that way back in 2015 when we were working on or before that, when we were working on the Sustainable Development Goals. Finally, we got that thing about women's empowerment and gender equality. It's the smallest agency in the world, in the UN system. And then second one is UNFCCC. And that's UN Women is probably the most effective. Secretary General in the United Nations has appointed more than 50% women leaders, not just at the entry level or junior level, mid-career, senior level. So it's bit by bit, things are moving. So thank you. So I'll go in the order of the seating arrangement. So I'm going to invite Naila now. Naila.
Thank you. I just want to answer your question. Is it Fernando? Is that your? Somehow, okay. So what I wanted to say just about youth, the second population that has to be engaged to save the climate issue is youth. And so if I just speak from the point of view of the MENA region is about 410 million people, about 50% of them are under the age of 25. So if youth aren't engaged in addressing the climate crisis, we're literally all going to die, right? And then there'll be nothing left for for this population that is coming to inherit this crisis. But one of the issues in the MENA region as well is that this youth population is also one of the most disenfranchised populations. So we suffer from some of the highest unemployment levels. We suffer from in some cases, just being completely squashed. That voice is being completely squashed and quelled, and in some cases jailed, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a real crisis in addition to the climate crisis. There's also a crisis in empowering the population that should be empowered to address it. And so I think one of the things as our network has tried to do, and it's something that had, it's garnered a lot of traction, but then for one reason or the other, whatever, and oftentimes that reason is either, banking restrictions or restrictions in the way that we can collaborate with each other, or just humanitarian crises that distract us, is we've tried to pull together a youth coalition. And that youth coalition is made up of foundations across the region, some of them not even part of our membership, they're just part of our larger network, that are all working in some way or another in the youth space, right? And the idea behind that coalition was to bring together all of the various actors in the ecosystem that empower youth in one way or the other, whether it's around education, whether it's around employment, et cetera. We had taken on the employment fight simply because we know that we have some of the largest unemployment levels in the world. But I think that that kind of coalition is malleable in terms of what it can address. So, maybe now we started the coalition in 2017. Maybe today the coalition addresses climate change and the role of youth in climate change. Because every single one of our network members, whether they're announcing it or not, as Princess Nof mentioned, is working on climate one way or the other. So if you're working in health, you're working in climate. If you're working in education, you're working in climate. If you're working on gender parity, you're working in climate, et cetera, et cetera. So I think one of the things that's incumbent on the sector to make the spaces available for youth to be able to have a space to go. Because I mean, often, I've attended 3 youth conferences in the past where not a single person under the age of 40 was invited to speak. I'm 51. I'm definitely not youth. I like to think I am. But I'm definitely not the demographic that should be up on the stage talking about our future, right? So if I'm in a position to do anything, I should be in the position to help empower those who can. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you. Very inspiring. Appreciate that. So philanthropy is a key enabler when it comes to addressing, I would say, bulk of the Sustainable Development Goals. And certainly there's an opportunity in the climate field. But if I was to ask Hassan, technology is the enabler when it comes to providing data, providing information, providing access to information. How would you sum up that? And the easy part is, how do you link that with philanthropy now? That's a new pillar you've added this morning.
So I think from what I've heard today, and it was a very insightful discussion, to be honest. Please, I will join it. What I see is that when it comes to connecting this different element of, okay, philanthropy wants to have this impact and also the advocacy role, but we have to identify together the relevant issue and also solution, and then make sure it's measured, it's impactful, engaging all communities and relevant people, youth, women, and others. So I think we really need now, and I'm now preaching, leverage the power of digitalization. I don't want to blame cat meals, because on the other side, social media can be a really strong tool for community engagement. And we have seen that it's like, if I blame the picture, then, but we need proper content. So we need to address misinformation to make sure the social media and all these tools are used in the right way to engage the right communities and to convey the right messages and the right values. When it comes to data, we need to work on cross-border data, because today we don't know how to share data. We don't know how to curate data. We don't know how to define the data, and especially when it comes to privacy. So we need to find the right balance between privacy and sharing data, because without sharing data, we cannot leverage the power of this global information that we have now connected together. And the third thing, we haven't heard the word so far, but we have to drop it when it comes to climate and innovation and cooperation. Artificial intelligence will help us. We need to embrace it. We need to understand it. So the first step for all of us is to understand those digital solutions. There is a scary part, and movies are coming out already telling us that we are all done. But there is a very positive element. We just need, again, to embrace, and also to make sure that communities are learning about what's the potential of those digital solutions. And that's maybe a last thing. Digitalization doesn't need to be fancy. And we were in New York, and there were an announcement of this Center for Innovation from Bangladesh. They focus on frugality of innovation. And that's also a very important element when it comes to addressing climate change from the community perspective, with digital solution or not like the fancy one. So I try to drop more ideas, and I hope it.
But thank you. Thank you. Very, very helpful. And I have Reem, and then I'm going to ask Gaurav to just sum up in terms of way you can leverage this group, and then I just say a few closing remarks. Reem, please.
I think moving forward, somebody who's been a practitioner for years and years and years, I think what's really important and what's a real opportunity in the region here is that you have a blend of traditional donors, right, who are your philanthropists, who are giving you agile money and able to respond immediately, and that's really particularly amazing in emergency situations. But we're also moving towards more innovative modalities, right? And we recognize that as practitioners, that there's a need for that. We cannot just continue to ask for funding and that's it. We want to be able to co-create with the donor. So the donor has ownership. The donor is actually at the table from the start. We are co-creating together, innovative approaches and to find sustainable solutions. And this is a huge opportunity in the region here. One, because as everybody mentioned, the youth population here is a lot more tech savvy, is a lot more aware of global issues, and is a lot more interested in responding and finding solutions for a better future for themselves. So that is really a wealth in itself. And of course, there's the opportunity here that it's a very generous population, in the region, very wealthy in many cases. And there is a lot of potential to create and co-create impactful modalities. And that's what we're looking for. And that's the reason why the WHO Foundation was actually created, because WHO could not rely only on member state funding, and we're not equipped nor able to deal with the private sector and philanthropy. So this is why we're here. And we do invite, people to talk to us if they have ideas and on moving forward when it comes to climate change and health in particular, but in other sectors as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We heard extensively how philanthropies do good stuff here, try and make that difference. We also heard from young people who are saying, we need to be heard. We need to figure out how to access the philanthropic community. We also realized that the UN could do more in terms of engaging the philanthropic community. So today's discussion was meant to be to hear ideas from everybody, get what I would call expert guidance from people who are doing great work and making a difference in society. And also, we want to inspire you to do something. So I'm going to, before I close the session, I'm going to put a challenge out to you guys. But I want to invite Gaurav to say, Gaurav, what would you say from your perspective is the next steps to respond to all the comments?
I think a lot of interesting comments, a lot of interesting ideas, and I think that's the power of such events, and that's why we're here convening these events. I would say 3 key messages came out for me out of this, and I think with the metaphor Princess Noor used for the UN being a tanker. We are a tanker, but we are starting to move a little bit faster than usual, I assure you. What we do see with the UN and with the UNFCCC is that even with our increased speed and all the motivation, enthusiasm we have, for example, with the UNFCCC, we are only 500 in total in number, the whole organization. So it's not that big in size. So we need definitely more support. And that is definitely my first, I would say, message here is we need more support from all stakeholders, but especially the philanthropies, and especially from the MENA region directly, but also I would say there are different modalities, and I think Reem touched on it. There are some new modalities that have come, and I think philanthropies can come together, especially in the region, and I think not just from Saudi, but also from the region, and probably even, I would say, pool their funding together to support not just the UN itself, but other entities. I think pool funding can be a great answer, excuse me, can be a great answer to support, especially the role philanthropy can play is with its agility, with its speed. It can come in when it's most needed. It can step in very fast. And that's what we see the big benefit of working with philanthropy. I think that's the one. So support in terms of directly, but also indirectly through pooling their funding and so forth and working together with other philanthropies. Second, I think philanthropies, the role of philanthropies, and I hope this can be something in the MENA region going forward, is advocacy. Advocacy with your governments, advocacy with other stakeholders on supporting more, not just the climate, as mentioned here, climate is linked with a lot of other almost every topic, to really do strong advocacy. Because for us, that advocacy is very important because we also deal very directly with the parties, with the governments, and that advocacy leads to more support that we get from the parties, the UN itself. I think second, third, and my final point, I think is participation. So it's really great to see a full house here today. I think participation from all stakeholders at all ages is very important, because what we see is that without participation, we cannot get the message out. We need to work together. The UN needs everyone's support. We are from the outside very bureaucratic, and that is maybe the case even inside at times. But I assure you, we really have strong and good intentions to push together this tanker in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Gaurav. I think you will all agree that we were enriched by today's discussion. We learned a lot, and we should start by thanking our esteemed panelists for taking the time to be with us and sharing their views and visions. Actually, so thank you. We are very grateful. Much appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. So I want to put out a challenge. We heard there's a need for what I would term as national philanthropy networks, like a listening post. Dare I say, not a application post, because then philanthropies want to give, but they don't want to have the thing, I need, I expect. They want to hear, we would like. The UN is the same. Everywhere you see that kind of scenario. And it's also clear that the UN and philanthropy should do something. UN should work on initiatives, and maybe that's where the national networks and UN can come together and be mutually supportive, where it can share what the national agenda is, regional and global agenda, and where philanthropies and even family offices can participate. we have kind of a semi-informal network of family offices, and we're looking to see how that can grow to support UNFCCC. So I leave one challenge to you. What's the one thing you can do till the next time we meet to address climate issues? And by the way, climate issues is not that big thing, but it's so hot here. It's what you can do at home. How you can change the way you address energy use, for example. How you can change the way you recycle things. How you can change the way you use fossil fuel, renewables, and other things. And it's not rocket science. So I'll give you a secret. If you look up a website in the UN, the lazy person's guide to the environment, if you do a search, something like that, you'll find the answer. So next time, and there are 10 things there, I'm only requesting one, and we'll take stock of that. And I want to thank you all for being here. Wish you much success. Thank you.